things happen.
Yeah, so I'll just say a brief introduction as a part of the overall Truth and Reconciliation program. And of course, Jeremy's topic today on peacemaking from a Rwandan perspective is very relevant to truth and reconciliation. So we're super excited for this session to be part of it. And a few little housekeeping is just that if you would turn yourself on mute and keep your video off while Jeremy is doing most of the presenting. And there will also be interactive parts where we'll welcome you to turn your video back on. So if you can just take a moment to see how to do that, it's in the top of your screen when there's a slide being shared, and otherwise it's on the bottom of your screen. So
one question, will this be video, will this be recorded and will we get a copy of the recording? I'm just wondering in terms of taking notes.
yes, it is being recorded and we're just finding out how exactly the videos are going to be distributed and everything like that. But we'll be keeping you informed as someone who registered. Okay. So your email is on the communications list for that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right. And with that, I will hand it back to Jeremy. Are you there? Great.
Yes, I am. I was just modeling the behavior. So welcome, and as you're saying, Kinyarwanda Miriwe, good afternoon from Kigali, Rwanda. It's another beautiful day here in lockdown. We're on day 5 of the latest, our 3rd round of lockdown, and really welcome each and every one of you from literally from around the world. And also I particularly welcome my colleague Jean Nepo Daimana, who is here in Kigali and works at the Kigali Genocide Memorial. So he knows way more about this topic than I do. So Jean Nepo, I may well be calling on you during the presentation. It's a privilege to have you with us today. And please do feel free to contribute, and I may ask you to add some things as we go along. So you didn't realize you were going to be a co-presenter today, but it's too wonderful an opportunity to have you here and not to hear your perspectives. So I hope you don't mind. So this session came out of discussions with Nalima originally early this year. And we did a session for a smaller group of TRW peacemakers in February, and then we did a follow-up session in June, and basically look at peacemaking from a Rwandan perspective. And so I'm going to explain the context in a moment. Just like to begin on the next slide with a quotation from our president, Paul Kagame, who had a very active role in the genocide. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, but Paul Kagame, who comes from a military background, he was a leader of the rebels who liberated the country to end the genocide, and his quotation, I think, is very symbolic of what this story is about and the implications for the rest of the world. I had to fight hard for everything. I wanted to get out. I wanted to take my destiny into my own hands and escape the vicious cycle of retaliatory violence. This struggle has shaped who I am to this day. And this puts things in context that it wasn't just what happened in the 3 months in 1994. This is something that took a long time to build, and we'll talk about more about that in a moment. First, just a little bit about where I am. For those of you that are not familiar with East Africa, I'm in Rwanda, in the, if you can just look at the next slide, please, Juliana. Which you can see there is in Central East Africa, where we have Uganda to the north, DR Congo to the west, Burundi to the south, and then Tanzania and Kenya to the east. So that's where we're physically located, as I said, near the equator. But just to get things going, we're going to have a little quiz for you and see your response. And just realized just before we started, the second option here, those are 2 words missing. So your options are, which of these statements is not true about Rwanda? It's one of the least densely populated countries in Africa. Should be one of the most popular tourist destinations in Africa. It boasts one of the fastest growing economies, been one of the least deadly countries in Africa in relation to COVID, and is the safest and cleanest city in Africa. So which one of these statements is not true? You're going to see a poll on your screen. And if you would fill it out, and if you don't know, guess which one of these is not true. And again, the second one should be, it has become one of the most popular tourist destinations. Okay, people are filling it out. Any more? Okay, so you can now see the results. So 2 of you went for the first one, 2 of you went for the fourth one, and 1 of you went for the second one. Well, in fact, it is the first one. In fact, Rwanda, even though there's a lot of green mountains, it's the land of 1,000 hills, it is in fact one of the most densely populated countries in Africa. It definitely is one of the most populous tourist destinations. Some people say it's the second most popular after Africa and ahead of Morocco. It still has one of the fastest growing economies. Obviously, it has been hit by COVID, but up until COVID, it was actually the fastest growing economy. Compared to other countries with reliable data, there are some countries that are just not reporting. So, for example, Tanzania and Burundi have just stopped reporting. So the ones with reliable data, Rwanda has done the best in terms of dealing with COVID, and we were very proud that we were able to keep Ebola out, even though it was right on the border, DR Congo. So we have been pretty effective dealing with COVID. We were the first country that went into full lockdown last year when COVID first hit. And as I said, this is the 3rd round of lockdown. So very serious about dealing with this latest surge, unfortunately, in cases and deaths, but still relatively modest, still less than 700 deaths total. So we've done pretty well in that respect, and certainly Kigali is safe as a clean city. So a little bit about Rwanda, where I'm living. And when I first came here 5 years ago, like many people first visiting here for the first time, that all I knew about Rwanda were the 3 Gs. So if you go to the next slide, the first G that everyone knows about, Juliana, next slide, please, is the gorillas. And so they're up in the mountains on the border with Uganda and DR Congo. And this is not a fake shot or anything, that you have the chance to go hiking up into the mountains and spend a precious hour with a family of gorillas. There were 10 in my family, and we spent this hour with them. And it was a wonderful photo bomb that the mother and baby just happened to go behind me as the shot was being taken. So that's one thing that a lot of people know about. Done a lot of work around conservation, and it was truly a life-changing experience when I first went 5 years ago. The second thing that a lot of people know about Rwanda is in relation to gender, that there's been a big effort, particularly since the genocide, to focus on the empowerment and education of women. Tradition was in the past that that girls and young women would not receive the same level of education as boys and young men. That has changed. And in fact, the reason I'm in Rwanda was that I was invited to work with the Akila Institute for Women, who've done fantastic work in terms of vocational training for women, largely from rural areas. So gender is very important. And then you may know the statistic that Rwanda has the most women in parliament of any country in the world. Latest statistic is about 61%, which is more than double the US, for example. So that's the second G. And the third G, which is more relevant to our topic today, is genocide, that we suffered this horrific genocide that happened 27 years ago. And certainly if any of you do visit here, another life-changing experience is to visit the Genocide Memorial, where Jean Paul works. And there's a museum there, and I thought I knew quite a lot about the genocide before I came, but it was nothing. I learned an awful lot there. So I just really, recommend that very strongly, that this is somewhere which is both a memorial to the genocide, that there are, correct me if I'm wrong, Jean-Paul, about 250,000 people who are actually buried at the memorial. Is that right?
259,000.
259, okay. And there's the museum there, there's archives. So it's something that, you know, really is, and pretty much every visitor, you know, official visitor. So the French president, Emmanuel Macron, was here recently and he went there. There's a special event and meeting. So let's focus on the genocide. We're going to do another quiz now and test your knowledge about what do you know about the genocide. So again, we're going to do this in poll format. So which of these statements is not true? I've already given you the answer kind of to one of them. So the poll will go up in a second. Think about which of these statements is not true. Okay, so still got time for a few more people to respond. It's quite a bit to read there, I realize that. Anyone else? I can't see all the results. Okay, maybe let's end the poll. And I can only see 2 of the results, even though it said that 4 of you voted. The answer is number 3. That in fact it's more than 800,000. That's considered the conservative estimate, and that in fact it's probably more than 1 million. It's difficult, obviously, to get a precise number, but it's definitely 800,000 is the minimum number of people that were massacred during this time, during just 3 months. But the other things, again, these are things that I came to realize a lot more when I went through the museum, that it didn't just happen, that it goes back to the late 50s, around the time of independence. Belgians and French were very much involved with what happened, what led up to it. Everyone is affected some way, directly or indirectly. One person I know who lost 68 family members during the genocide, and another friend who lost their father and 3 brothers. So it's just something that is very much still very prevalent in people's minds and hearts. A lot of people fled and never been brought to justice. Some have, but not there's many that haven't. There is, as happened with the Holocaust, for example, after the Second World War, there is more genocide denial nowadays, particularly as the second generation comes forward after the genocide. So this is happening. And you may have read in the news recently, Paul Rusesabagina, who was profiled in the Hotel Rwanda movie, he's not a hero at all. He was basically just a conniving huckster, fraudster, opportunist, and he has been seen on video inciting violence. So a little bit about the genocide and the context. Welcome back, Pat. Oh, I think the poll is closed now. So what I wanted to share was, a lot of people ask is, well, how did it happen? What happened? And this is based on research done by a Hungarian psychologist, Irvin Staub, which has been developed through Aegis Trust, which runs the Genocide Memorial. And it's not terribly clear. You'll be able to see it a bit clearer when you get a copy of this. But this basically maps what happened, the descent into genocide. And this is particularly related to our conversation about peacemaking, is, what can lead to genocide? How can things deteriorate so badly? And I'll just read through it very quickly for those of you who can't see it clearly. So it's a continuum, and it's a descent literally from social cohesion to social destruction. So it starts with poor living conditions, where individuals might turn to an existing group for support and protection. Then you have social polarization, where scapegoating can happen. Discrimination, where a certain group is continually devalued and marginalized. And this all happened to the Tutsis, minority Tutsis here in Rwanda. And think about it in relation to maybe other genocides of what happened in relation to Jews and others during the Holocaust period and in other genocides elsewhere around the world. So there is this pattern that has happened. Number 5, the group accepts a destructive ideology promoted by the leaders. They accept the propaganda that it's true that these other people are subhuman or whatever. A very important one is the absence of active bystanders. Witnesses to the discrimination and physical violence do nothing. So that was something that happened here, also happened during the Holocaust and elsewhere, is this lack of active bystanders, people who could possibly do something but don't for different reasons. Then extreme respect for authority, lack of contact between groups, again, ever increasing polarization, separation, manipulation appeal of people through unhealed psychological wounds, dehumanization and demonization, and then leading to a failing state, presence of war and extreme violence. And when I first saw that Jean Nepos showed me this in, I think Jean Nepos was about June of last year, if I remember. And when I saw it, I was shocked because having lived in the US for 30 years, and I am a US citizen, I felt, at the time, in the run up to the last election and some of the rhetoric, some of what was happening, that, by my estimation, that maybe the US was on step 8 or 9. And what I feared, some of you who saw my writing at the time, was that the US could also descend, perhaps not into genocide, but certainly into group violence, mass violence. And there was a kind of sigh of relief that nothing happened on the actual election. But then January the 6th, the insurrection at the Capitol building, to me, was kind of an expression of number 10, not an extreme example, but still, it was something that never happened before. 5 people were killed. So to me, the US, this is, to me, was a big warning that, even a country like the US is not immune to this form of social destruction. Jean Nepos, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Is there anything you want to add? I realize I'm going through this very quickly. Jean Nepos, is there anything you want to add in relation to this?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. The concept was developed by a non-Rwandan, of course, citizen from outside. And when they developed this theory, it was based on what happened to Jewish people right away after the Holocaust. And the book that was used to, this continuum appears in the book of Ervin Staub, Professor Ervin Staub from United States, who is now in retirement. He used to be a lecturer at Massachusetts University. And when we went through this book, we found that this is so important to see how this journey is common to humanity, especially the humanity that is being to be killed during the genocide. And as you said, it is a process that it takes time. It does not happen overnight. It is a process that leaders take through their people until they accept and commit crimes against humanity, which is genocide. So in Rwanda, this journey has happened, and sometimes people say that the spark of the genocide is the death of the former president Habyarimana. Yet it is not. These all steps started in 1940s when colonialists were still with us. So that's the time this journey started. And it took around 50 years for genocide to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Shanjanapal. And then, if we want to, as few of you are in the US and know the US, that, likewise, January 6th and even the whole of the previous administration didn't just happen for the last 4 or 5 years. Many people see the roots of this perhaps going back to the 60s, going back to the assassinations of Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Malcolm X. And, so that violence that happened then and, breakdown and obviously certain signposts along the way. So again, there are some eerie parallels here, which we can talk about a little bit more. But what I want to focus on, wanted to obviously, set the scene. And thanks again, Jean-Paul, for clarifying that. And also, to try to look at, okay, so what have we learned from this? What has happened? What has learned in the 27 years since the genocide? And, the country was decimated after the genocide. And so if we look at the levels of recovery, and again, this is something, we could spend all day on, but just very briefly, the next slide, please, is 4 elements when you think about recovery. International, obviously there was aid and help from many countries around the world, international organizations that came in here, aid organizations, NGOs, World Bank, IMF, UN. So international efforts, certainly. Then national efforts in terms of what happened within the country, in terms of recovering. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was around focus on women's empowerment and education. So that was a national effort that happened. Other things focused around maternal health, for example. That was another thing that happened on a national level. Then within communities, and that's what we want to focus on, community and individuals. So first we're going to focus on a couple of community responses of things that were and have been very successful. So just have a quotation in relation to the first community response of basically around justice, is around how, what happened. I mean, because of that, what happened was not as in the Nazi period, for example, where you had, official troops, death camps that were kind of state organized. Here, even though that clearly the regime supported the genocide, a lot of the actual deaths, murders that happened were villager on villager, neighbor on neighbor, even within families. And so, think about the desire for revenge and how do you then deal with the people? I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people who committed atrocities, who were complicit, and thinking about, well, how do you mete out justice? And so I have a quote here that my father, quoting the Talmud, would very often say to me, and something I think is relevant here when you're thinking about justice after the genocide. When you kill someone, they die once. When you humiliate them, they die 1,000 times. And so his view, explaining the Talmud to me, was that to even, in victory, even when trying to mete out justice, to find a humane way to serve justice, even if inhumane injustice has been wrought. So one of the ways that this was dealt with is what was called on the next slide, please, the Gacaca courts. And this is a form of traditional community justice here in Rwanda, where, and again, Jean-Paul, I'm going to ask you to clarify in a moment, from what I understand, that people who committed any form of acts were asked to come or invited to come in front of their peers, their villages, their community, and confess to what they did, and then ask for forgiveness. And then a group of villagers, of elders, would then decide what was appropriate in terms of any form of retribution, compensation, etc. And this was a way of being able to mete out local justice in a humane way, because it would have taken many, many decades to do it through the law courts. So it was decided to do it in this more traditional form of community justice. Jean-Paul, again, is there anything you want to say about this? Because again, this is a huge topic which we're just touching on, but it's so important in terms of being able to start the healing and the reconciliation.
Yes, thank you very much. Gacaca courts as one of the homegrown solutions that the government of Rwanda has installed because the Gacaca courts used to be there before colonialism. And these Gacaca courts were reinstalled after the genocide because when you look at the cases that were supposed to be handled by classic justice, it would take around 150 years to give justice to everyone, either suspect or victims. And the government of Rwanda tried its best to get the suitable solution to deal with this horrible history that we have had. That's how in 2002, Gacaca were again brought back to as one of the justice approaches to deal with the genocide suspects. So these courts were based were community-based justice. People were coming together and they elect people with integrity. We call them inyangamugayo, or people with integrity that have not committed crime, or people with the good values that who were like exemplaries in the community to rule and to spearhead these justices. These people who were selected by community members were trained on some roles, of course, not academic laws, as I can say, but they were introduced with the policies and the roles that will govern the church courts. Then when the time comes, when the time came, the people could come together and they start from one person A to Z who were killed during the genocide. Then they share the experience, they share the information. Who was killed, that person, who was involved, who rooted, who did what. They elaborate all crimes committed in that particular village. Then whoever was suspect was brought into in the public for the community members to hear from him or her, explains what community has said about him. And once the cases or the crimes he seemed to be guilty with the cases, these courts had the power to express the conviction or the sentences. So these people who come for Gacaca court had some advantages, I would say. They could do, if they happen to accept what they have done, they could ask for forgiveness. And once they have given all information related to whatever was done during the genocide, people could say, especially the survivors of the genocide, could forgive them. And of course, it is not an automatic journey that happens when it comes to forgiveness. It's a process. But these people had a chance to be forgiven by survivors. Of course, when they happen to accept what they have done, the sentences could be also reduced. That's how these courts managed to handle 2 million and 100 cases in 10 years, since 2011, 2002 up to 2012. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean-Paul. So it was an incredible, amount that was able to done in a relatively short amount of time. Obviously, a lot of people know, Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa, which was some parallels, but somewhat different as well. So again, this was, as Jean-Paul said, one of the homegrown solutions to do something that worked in the Rwandan context, and it was very successful. And now there are many stories of where there had been killings, murders within villages, or two different villages that are on opposite sides of a valley, where now not only they came back together to work together to share the river running through it, but even, things like intermarriage again. And so it was very, very successful. Another element of community response, which I wanted to highlight, and I have a quotation here from Martin Luther King, um, which seems very appropriate. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. So with that in mind, another thing that the government of President Kagame did was to revive a traditional practice, which still happens until, well, you say until COVID hit. So this is one of the unique things that I've not seen anywhere else in the world. It's called umuganda, and basically it's a form of community service. So the tradition that was reinstituted after genocide was that communities, neighborhoods, even streets would all come together on Saturday morning, last Saturday of the month, for a few hours. They would come together, do some form of community service, whether it's here, street cleaning, helps, re-roof somebody's house, clean gutters, whatever it might be that particular community needed, particularly helping the elderly and sick. And then might come together, have a meeting to discuss anything that's going on, might have some food together. So it's a very powerful practice, because particularly those of you living in big cities, do we really know our neighbors? Do we even know our family anymore because they're so spread out? But it really does, this idea of meeting together, even for a few hours every month, really has that very strong binding effect of bringing people together. So something that, unfortunately, we've not been able to do for the last 16 months, but, when it's safe to do so, will be reinstituted, I'm sure. So it is something which, again, is as the countries come out of the horrors of the genocide, being able to reconcile through the Gacaca process, and then now to rebuild, Umuganda has been one of the elements of rebuilding, in a way, of rebuilding community, a sense of pride in community. Moving on to the individual response. Again, as you can tell, I love quotations. So this one is from a former US President, Richard Nixon. Others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. So it's that personal response. We talked about the Gacaca courts as a form of humane way of meting out justice on a larger level. And we have a second continuum from originally from Dr. Staub that has been adapted for the Genocide Memorial. And this is looking at the way out of social deconstruction. So again, we're going to put the slide up, which is not that easy to see, but I'll walk through it very briefly. But as you'll see, this response is more on the personal level. Obviously, some of it needs to be enabled on a community and national level. You can see the next slide, please, Juliana. So this is called the continuum of benevolence. The other one is continuum of violence, it's continuum of benevolence. So the steps back up towards social reconstruction. And again, that focus on the individual. So again, I'll walk through it very quickly. So moving from very understandable emotions of indifference, fear, mistrust, anger, resentment. And I want to say it's very important, this can last quite a while. Some people, even 27 years later, are still in that area of, still not being able to get beyond that. But for many people, they were gradually. It took a while to be able to get beyond those very understandable feelings, negative feelings towards other people, particularly towards the perpetrators. And then gradually opening up, accepting what happened, accepting the other person. And this is a hard one, showing respect for the other person, showing them some form of esteem, some form of dignity, whatever happened. And again, the Gacaca process was important in that, showing empathy, where you're bringing in the emotions to be able to not just respect someone in an intellectual way, but actual having empathy with the other person, having compassion with the person, and then showing caring towards the other person, even service, kindness, concern, connecting with other people in different ways, obviously socially, etc. Creating a feeling of community again, actually showing love, outward love, compassion, caring again, in a more emotional way, building towards a sense of peace. And obviously that's different for every individual person, family, community. But those are the 10 steps which really are through the individual. So it's a bit different from the continuum we saw earlier, which is more at the societal level, political level, leadership level. This is more kind of the retail one-on-one level. And again, Jean-Paul, can I just ask if you have anything to add to this? Again, going through this extremely quickly, but just anything else you want to point out?
Yes. As you said, this is a journey that starts when genocide or violence, extreme violence is ended. As colleagues can see clearly, this number one, it's not a step as such. It's a situation that follows the violence. Whether people like it or not, this situation happens when violence ends. So that's where the journey starts. People start being indifferent from one another. A lot of mistrust is there. It is a case that we Rwandans have experienced right away after genocide, where we had a lot of mistrust and people couldn't go to any doctor to be treated. People couldn't go to any restaurant to be served because there was a lot of mistrust. Of course, as you know, that genocide has taken away all trust and values, so people couldn't really trust one another. So it took us time to trust people again, but as the journey started with a new government that was put in place June 19th, 1994, that's where this journey started. But as the time went on, these other steps were made. And when you look at the way these steps are constructed, one comes after the other. There is nothing to jump. This number two can't happen when number one is not there. Step number three can't happen when number two is not there. So it's a logical scenario that happens for these steps. And of course, there are many contributing factors that made this journey possible for many Rwandans. As you can see on this graphic, there is now the social cohesion was zero right after genocide, but the journey is to have this number 10, where people live harmoniously and have good relationships as it used to be before the introduction of colonialism that destroyed our values and unity of Rwandans. So from step number one to step number 5, these all steps happen from within. And from step number 6 up to step number 10, that's how other people outside me can see and benefit from what is inside me. That's how it is built, and it's a journey, it's a process. And you can also, we can also make another comment. I can make another comment on this one. People can make these steps, and maybe someone can reach to number 7 or number 6 step. But when there is something like a trigger that can make people going back, let me take an example. There is a time I had full trust to people, I would say, as a survivor. My dad, who survived the genocide in 2001, was killed. And he was killed by neighbors. So imagine where I went back on step number 1, but before he was killed, I was somewhere, I was on a good step for this journey. But when they killed my dad, who survived the genocide in 2001, immediately I lost I lost again trust with those people from where I was born from. That's an example of how people can move fast or can go back as far as these steps are concerned. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Jean-Paul. That must have been so difficult. You'd never told me that before. I'm very, very sorry.
It's okay.
I'm just thinking, as you're on the call, Jean-Paul, that we're thinking of going to breakouts, but I'm just wondering at this stage, we've presented a lot very quickly. Is at this point, maybe it might be good to throw it open to questions, that perhaps, any of you have any questions, if you want to come on audio video to ask your question, or you just want to put it in the chat. Anything to clarify, anything that you didn't understand or wanted to hear a little bit more about. So let's throw it open to questions right now. Or comments. Seem to be any moment. Zara, you have
just to say thank you for this presentation. It's so powerful, and I love the two, sort of steps that you have shown, this one and the previous one. It's scary, especially as Susan and I were sort of comparing these to what's happening here. But yeah, it's really, really very powerful, and thank you for. There's a lot I didn't realize and know, and yeah, these solutions I think have been great. So inspiring me to think of things that I can do on an individual level for various things. So thank you, both of you.
Okay, a pleasure. Jean-Paul's saying, can we bring that quotation from Nixon? So the previous slide, Juliana, can we just bring that back a second? No, the previous slide. This is also very powerful. Let me just focus on this. This is a survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp. So love and hope are infinitely more powerful than hate and fury. So I think a lot of us around the world are seeing that, certainly. But can we go back to the previous quote on slide 16?
I'm having a little trouble going back for some reason, so maybe we will have to remember it from our heart.
Okay. I'll read it out. So it's from President Nixon.
You can write in the chat. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea. I'll just put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a question. Jonathan, do you want to deal with it from Susan? Specifically interested in the role of women's leadership in the social reconstruction process. So how do you see that?
A good question from Susan, and of course, we as a country that has, as you mentioned, that Rwanda is known of 3Gs. So there is a lot of contribution of women in this social reconstruction of Rwanda right away after genocide, because when you leave one behind and you are constructing a nation, you are not constructing a full nation, you are constructing a half nation. So leaving women behind, you are leaving a very influential people behind in this reconstruction process. So Rwandans, especially Rwandan women have really contributed a lot in this reconciliation. And of course, reconciliation process, as we have many stories from women that have either had courage to forgive the perpetrators, especially the widows that lost children and the husbands, that managed to forgive the perpetrators and now living together with them in the community, having women in leadership position that have spearheaded some commissions, some law enforcement. When you look at police, security organs, we have seen many women representing those institutions. We can also mention that at national level, they have managed to bring more women decision makers, especially in the parliament. I think Rwanda is number 2 with a high number of women in the world after one of the Scandinavian countries that I don't remember. So they have played a very big role in this reconciliation and construction process in general.
I would just endorse that from the outside. And remember that President Kagame, he's a military man. He's not a politician, and came from, a very male-dominated, military background, yet was able to see this, as Jean Nepo said, this on a very basic level, untapped resource, and being able to change that to build the new Rwanda. And I see that again. His wife Jeanette, is not just a first lady. She's been very active in different organizations in terms of women's empowerment and other things as well. And you see that different organizations are one of the most powerful organizations around business development and inward investment is the Rwanda Development Board, run by a woman. So there are many organizations where you see very strong, capable, empowered women doing great work. And so you couldn't get stronger role modeling than that. And the question is, in the future, will we have a woman president, and why not? In the future, we don't know when, but there's absolutely no reason why a woman cannot be president in the future.
It is being whispered that maybe next president will be a woman.
We're not allowed to say that though.
No, of course. That's the rumor. That's what the people gossip around, because they say that the way women are being given, are being empowered, we might have a female president.
Yeah, we'll see. Does that answer your question, Susan, or do you have any other specific questions? That's good. Any other questions or thoughts as we're discussing this? Zara is saying, humility is much needed characteristic and value for healing. What I would suggest is at this point, go into breakout sessions and maybe change it a little bit, maybe just for 5 minutes, and we'll put you into groups of 3. Actually, you don't need to show this, Juliana, because I think it will actually confuse people because we have less time than we thought. So we'll put you into random groups of 3, and just ask you to contemplate the quotation. So you have the quotations from Nixon there, and I'll put in the quotation from the Auschwitz survivor, and just think about that. The implications. Some of you, for example, have commented about being in the US and certain eerie parallels, but wherever you are in the world, what are the implications here in terms of what Rwanda's done, and thinking about not hating others and being able to love and hope. So you as peacemakers, whatever you're doing actively in that area, what can we do? What can you do in terms of making sure love and hope overcome?
Well, I think Jeremy is having a little trouble with his internet, but I think he's introduced the breakouts pretty successfully. So I'm going to open the rooms, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hello there. I got
We lost you. It was actually a perfect time to lose you because you had just finished talking about the breakout session and then I just initiated the rooms for everyone. So,
So how many people are there? Are there 2 rooms or what?
yes, there's 2 rooms. So there's one with John Nepo and Zara and Muskan, who I think is still in the main room with us, and one with Izelda, Patricia, and Susan. So you can feel free to jump into those groups and chat to them, or of course just stay here with us.
Okay, well, I'll jump in to the other group. And Muskan, if you want to join a group, please do. Well, either of you, if you want to.
Yeah.
I will join room 2.
Okay, sure. Are you able to do so, or I can move you to room 2? 1 second. Okay, there you go. Great.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's start on video if we can. Oh, the other group's not come back yet. Come back, come back.
I don't think I can turn my video on, actually.
Okay. So let me try and do that
Yeah.
for you. Where are you? Oh, there you
Yeah,
are.
it says that, okay, start my video.
Okay, I've
Right.
asked you to restart it.
Right. Okay, that's good. Thanks.
So welcome back. Oh, John Paul, you're on video too. Great.
Yes.
And clearly, there's a lot more to be discussed. That's what we found first time we did this presentation. And, I want to, Susan saying she has to leave. Thanks very much for coming, Susan. To be continued. Appreciate it. And you will get the recording and the slides and everything. So let me know if you have any more questions. Rest of you, if you can stay a little bit longer, I'm happy to do so. I do have something at 4 o'clock, but I can certainly stay for the next 10 minutes or so. But those of you that have to leave, definitely please contact me if there's anything else I can help with. And just any other kind of thoughts, questions? We were just talking in the small group about, what about societies that haven't descended into the kind of chaos and violence that was seen here. And I just brought up the point about South Africa, of what's been happening there recently. Zelda, you were about to comment on it and we got cut off. So do you want to just say what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think Zuma's in prison now, and everybody said it's because of his imprisonment that all of this happened. But really, the problem is a lot deeper than just Zuma. It's the inequality that we have in South Africa, one of the most unequal societies in the world. And the fate of the poor is just that there's no hope. And it's made worse, obviously, by COVID. Many people lost their jobs, but the joblessness is anyway some of the also the highest in the world. So it's people who have nothing and they have nothing to lose. So I just think that this whole situation spilled over into the unrest that we had, and none of us are really surprised by it. We are still, I live in Stellenbosch, and in the Western Cape, we didn't have any of this going on, but we have taxi wars here where people shoot each other. I think 70 people have died in the taxi wars. So it's not like we don't have unrest. It's just like everything is just ramping up and it's spilling over in the form of violence. But now at the same time, you must see the South African spirit, the spirit among the people. They are cleaning up. I've seen videos. People in wheelchairs are taking a broom and cleaning up from where the looting was. So there's still that Ubuntu Rainbow Nation thing that is coming through in South Africa. So that you don't see on international television, but it's there, and it's lovely to know that we still have it after 27 years.
Right, right. So there's some hope in amid that, but no, it's very disturbing. And to the credit, I tend to watch BBC Focus on Africa, and they have been showing that. So, but I agree that a lot of the press has kind of moved on already. They showed the violence and then didn't go back. So unfortunately, we only get part of the story. You know, I'm just thinking, you know, is there, for your home country, Sri Lanka, also, there's been a lot of violence. Things seem quieter now, but, you know, again, is there still potential for outbreaks?
Yes, I think there is for sure. And I think COVID has just changed everything, you know, for everybody everywhere. I think that just has put this additional huge stress on, you know, everyone. And I think, especially as you can see, I mean, here in the States as well, everywhere the inequalities come through so clearly, which is so sad. I actually, well, my sister actually, who's visiting here right now, lives in Sri Lanka. I haven't been back for a couple of years. But yes, you know, again, it's the political changes, and it's just, it's so frustrating, and it's so, it's really overwhelming. I think, you know, with the previous election here in the US and what was happening, I mean, I just felt so unable to really do things, you know. I mean, it was just an awful sort of feeling of powerlessness. And I mean, especially even after the election, the recent elections, and then January 6th. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask was, actually, I was lucky enough to be in the same breakout room as Jian Nipo. And I wanted to ask, I mean, how do you sort of deal with that? I mean, Iselda, just like you were saying right now in South Africa, you know, how overwhelming that is, and that's kind of almost like no hope. I mean, the fact that I think it's a lack of hope always that pushes people to terrorism, to violence. I mean, that's my, you know, kind of belief, because you say they have nothing to lose. And as individuals, you know, how do you recommend sort of getting out of that? I mean, I know it's involvement and doing things in the community, but sometimes I felt almost paralyzed, and I'm not, you know, I've kind of, I don't know how to deal with that at times. So not very coherent, sorry, but.
Jean-Paul, do you want to address that? You're on mute.
I didn't get it well, but I think if I got it, it was about how a community which is paralyzed can be helped. Am I right? Is that?
I'm sorry.
Community that's paralyzed, a community that has no hope.
Yeah, if possible, it can be reanimated, I would say. So actually, let me turn the video off because the internet is not good. So of course, when a community has gone through violence, like as you said, in Sri Lanka, and of course, Rwanda's case studies are something that can give hope to other communities, that every community can be rebuilt, because we have seen it in Rwanda working. It depends on the leadership around that community that leads that community, not other outside factors, but internal factors are key engines of that community to be rebuilt. So Rwandan community was paralyzed in 1994. People had no hope. Community members were completely indifferent to one another. But as the time went on, facilitated by the government in place with other factors like community engagement, engaging the community with the different policies that brings all people together, not considering their historical backgrounds, helped them to come together. For example, right away after genocide, the government of Rwanda has eliminated the ID that was displaying someone's ethnic group, which were used by the former leaders to discriminate Tutsis. So all those ID documents were abolished. And after being abolished, they were given an ID that shows that you are Rwandan, only Rwandan. That's why we're promoting a program called Ndi Umunyarwanda, which means I'm Rwandan, not a Tutsi or a Hutu or a Twa. That's the identity that we're trying to promote, not singling people out of their historical background based on their ethnic groups that were given by colonialists, because those ethnic groups that were politically baptized by colonialists, before they were social classes, you know, people do not live in the same classes. People, we may find the rich, middle, and poor people. That's normal in each and every society. But when colonialists came in Rwanda, they made them ethnic groups. And people maintained that for almost 70 years. And it's, of course, that's the challenge we are facing today, fighting with that ideology that was built around this ideology of ethnic ideology. So now, depending on the leadership in place, every society can move again, despite the past. So in Rwanda, we are now considering one another as Rwandans. We are not giving people job, or people are not being employed by the government because they come from this group, just because they qualify. I think Jeremy, as an outsider, can confess that. I mean, can confirm that.
Yeah.
Today, nobody is benefiting any rights or any benefits, not because he belongs where history has put us. I go to university because I have marks to go there. I get a job because I have passed exam. But before genocide, people are freely given jobs and the opportunities because they were Hutus. So now today, everyone is considered as a Rwandan, not as a Hutu or as a Tutsi. So that's how we have come together to build our one single national identity that defines all of us. Of course, we are still having some people outside, especially outside, that deny genocide, that are always struggling around that ideology. So it's a journey. But at least people in Rwanda, I would say 99 or 95 and above, believe in that unity, that has brought Rwandans together. That's what I think I can make. So Sri Lanka can also be it can also be possible as long as leadership brings that unity among the people of Sri Lanka.
And the thing I would see as an outsider, I would agree entirely. I've had that, many times where a taxi driver might say to me, my mother was a Hutu, my father's a Tutsi, but I'm a Rwandan now. And, it's not a slogan. It feels that way. But I think, again, I would come back to leadership. Obviously, I focus on leadership, that President Kagame, like no politician is not perfect, but at the same time, he has shown strong leadership and he has helped to rebuild the country. Whereas, when I look at what has happened in South Africa, that after, the great start after apartheid, but what has happened, under the Zuma years and now, obviously different views with Ramaphosa, but, in terms of leadership or leadership in Malaysia or in Sri Lanka and other countries, that in many countries, the leadership is not there to be able to bring people together. And, I'd even say certainly in the UK, in the US, even though leadership has changed, again, I'm still have my doubts, unfortunately, about what's going to happen and if the leadership is strong enough to be able to bring people together. I mean, in the US, it's 400 years. It's not just 5 years, you know, so it's difficult. It takes time, but I think leadership is a key to it, to be able to help people to be able to overcome the injustices, grievances of the past, to be able to come together. It's not easy. No, not easy at all. Any last thoughts or questions? Unfortunately, I do have to go in a minute. If you want to stay with Juliana, and I don't know, Jean-Paul, if you can stay, but unfortunately, I've got to get ready for another session. But I really enjoyed it. And again, all of you who have been to the Globally Conscious Peacemakers, Juliana, Muskan, you're most welcome to join us as well on 12th of August for our next round. And in fact, colleague Shada Naidu will be talking about the South African situation in the next sessions on 12th of August. I don't know, Zelda, do you know Shada?
No, I don't.
No. So she'll be talking about that from kind of an economic disparity, what you mentioned, you know, sort of the huge divisions there are. So she's going to talk it from that, but also from a personal point of view as well. So we'll be focusing that on more. So for now, I will bid you all thanks very much for coming. Thank you, Jean-Paul, in particular. Or you didn't realize you were going to be presenting today, did you?
No, I didn't.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Experience. So, thank you very much for the time we spent with you and Iran Tarot too. So see you again. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
And one final note, just for the Truth and Reconciliation Week overall, is that we're encouraging people to donate to a few COVID causes. So I'm putting in a link here with a few suggestions, as well as the program for the rest of the week. So I do hope that you guys can check that out.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks so much.
Welcome.
You've been wonderful. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Juliana and Muskan, for your help. Appreciate it. Bye for now.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.